Natalia tells us she was injured just a couple of hours earlier. We tried to get some stuff out of our apartment, she says, and a shell or something hit, and I got hit by shrapnel. Still in shock, she dismisses the pain and walks away unaided. Others need more assistance. Soldiers carry a makeshift stretcher to ferry an elderly woman to safety. President Putin has said his army is not targeting civilians. But the exodus from Irpin tells a different story. Everyone steps in where they can, including us. An elderly woman calls out for help, clearly confused by the chaotic situation. We take one of her bags.
So people are obviously incredibly affected by this situation. They're frightened, they're exhausted, they're on edge.
They leave behind whatever they cannot carry, with no sense of when they will return. A woman approaches, completely overcome.
She said, I'm afraid.
For what, she cries. For what? This is just one suburb in one city that has felt the wrath of Russia's onslaught. Artillery, missiles, and fighter jets. The planes were flying, and I just covered my ears, Olga Kudlai tells us.
She's saying that now she doesn't even know where she's going to go next.
She has lived in Irpin for 45 years. It was so beautiful, and now it's destroyed, she says. What are they trying to achieve? To bring us to our knees? But against all odds, 10 days into this war, Ukraine is still standing. A woman waits to be evacuated, trembling but resilient. We will overcome everything, she says. For the people of Irpin, the journey is just beginning. They're loaded onto buses to the train station. From there, they don't know where they will go.
And now, Wolf, up until yesterday, most of these people were being evacuated using trains, using the railways. This is the most effective and easiest method to move people in and out. But Ukrainian authorities told us that Russian saboteurs actually blew up one of the railway tracks, making it impossible for them to any longer use trains to ferry people out to safety. And that's why you're seeing this bottleneck at this bridge and others like it as people flee on foot, desperately trying to protect their families and find something resembling safety, Wolf.
Yeah, what Putin's troops are doing is sick. So sick indeed. Clarissa, stand by. I want Anderson to come back into this conversation. Anderson, you've been on the ground now in Ukraine for about a week, bearing witness to Ukrainian resolve, which is so impressive. What has stood out to you most of all among the things that you've heard and seen?
I mean, I think, you know, it's become almost a cliche to talk about the resolve, but you can't not talk about it. I've never been in a country at war that is so united among its civilian population in support of resistance and in the desire to do something, to band together, to small acts, large acts, whatever people can do, they're trying to do. And I think it's just extraordinary to see. I've been in a number of countries at war over the last 25 years, and I've just never seen anything like the sense of determination, not just for last week and this week, but the sense that even if this goes on a long time, and even if Russia occupies this country, there's that sense that there will still be resistance even then.
And 100%, I think you're absolutely right. Clarissa, Russia once again has broken yet another ceasefire agreement. I don't even know if you could call it that, to allow civilians to get out of some of the most hard-hit cities and areas. So what danger do civilians face as they're simply trying to get to safety?
Well, I mean, look at the example of the railway being blown up, Wolf. That's a classic indicator of some of the tactics that Russia is doing that clearly do not speak to any concern for the lives of civilians. There is a sense when people are trying to flee, even if there is a cessation of hostilities or some temporary ceasefire, some humanitarian corridor, that anything goes and that any target is legitimate in the eyes of Russian forces. The other thing to keep in mind, Wolf, is that there isn't really a safe space for people to go to. I mean, we talk about crossing from Irpin into central Kiev like that's reaching some safe haven, but it's far from it. We know that there has been pretty consistent bombardment around this city. There's a huge column of Russian armory poised to enter the city, potentially to encircle it. This is far from a safe space. And so those people are being taken to another railway station on those buses. From there, they begin another arduous journey with no sense that their security is going to be protected, and really no sense as well, Wolf, of where they're going to end up, where they're going to even sleep that night, and what their future will bring, whether they'll ever be able to go back to their homes. It's deeply frightening and deeply ominous for the people here, Wolf.
And so many of their homes have already been leveled. So many of their homes have been totally destroyed. Anderson, I know you've spoken to Ukrainian officials. Do they feel this conflict right now maybe at some kind of inflection point?
No one's used that term. I mean, look, every day there's the sense that we're maybe on the cusp of the next phase of this, the next escalation. I talked to an advisor to President Zelensky yesterday, and they continue to, and we heard this from Congressman Himes earlier talking to you, Wolf. You know, they continue to push for some sort of no-fly zone. That's certainly a non-starter as far as the U.S. and most of the NATO countries are concerned. But look, the officials know that without controlling the skies, or at least having the stopping the Russians from being able to get air superiority, it is going to be increasingly difficult to stop the bombardment of cities, the bombardment of residential communities, and the destruction of the country, missile by missile, bomb by bomb, artillery shell by shell.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Anderson, stand by. Clarissa, as I say to you every single day, stay safe over there. You're in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. Just ahead, a very, very disturbing new video of Ukrainian protesters defying Russian forces as the enemy troops simply open fire. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're getting very disturbing new reports out of Ukraine right now that the Russians are using increasingly brutal tactics against civilians. Ukrainian authorities say Kremlin forces opened fire during an anti-war protest in a small town in eastern Ukraine. We have disturbing video capturing the gunfire. Watch this. Let's bring in our senior international correspondent, Matthew Chance, who was in that town earlier today. Matthew, at least one protester was shot during that confrontation, and we have additional video capturing that moment. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, the local officials say that it was 3 people that were injured, but that video shows that one person clearly shot as he confronted those Russian forces. I mean, look, we've seen scenes like this across the country with unarmed Ukrainian civilians very angry at the fact their country has been invaded by Russian forces. And really up until now, the Russians had been, it's almost like I want to say they've been quite patient with them. They certainly haven't shot them. They've been sort of pushing them back and saying no. But yeah, that mood appears to have changed. Take a look at what happened to this individual as he shouted abuse at Russian forces. Yeah, so, I mean, look, he's shot there, he's struggling, he's fallen to the floor. Russian forces shouting, leave the area, telling people to do that. And so, a very disturbing scene there when you look at these civilians coming face to face with the heavily armed Russian invasion force, Wolf.
You know, Matthew, it's truly a stunning confrontation, even more so because the crowd simply doesn't move when the Russians, at least initially, open fire with their weapons.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And it's one of the most striking things about this. And it just shows you that the sort of depth of defiance that there is in this country when it comes to opposing Russian forces. Yeah, listen, the Russians, firing their bullets in the air, to try and disperse that crowd. But, they're not moving. And I think it talks to that idea that if the Kremlin felt that people were going to welcome Russian soldiers with open arms, if they thought they were going to back down and not resist the occupation and the invasion of their land, then they were very, very badly mistaken.
They certainly were. Matthew Chance, stay safe over there. We'll be in touch for sure. And there's more breaking news. We're following Europe. Europe is now facing what's threatening to become its largest refugee crisis since World War II, as more than 1.3 million Ukrainians flee the Russian invasion. We're talking mostly women and children during these first 10 days of the Russian war against Ukraine.
The breaking news tonight, Russia's invasion of Ukraine sparking a refugee crisis that is growing by the hour, with waves, mostly women and children, fleeing the fighting, many of them winding up next door in Poland. CNN senior national correspondent Sarah Seidner has been there for us now for days. Sarah, you're at a refugee shelter. If you can, just walk us through what you have been seeing and hearing from those arriving today.
Anderson, this is a parking lot, by the way, and what is basically a super center that has been defunct for a while now, and people are going in there to try and sleep. But out here, throughout the night, you are seeing busloads of people coming through, and we're seeing more people than we have been seeing in the past few days, and we understand that is because there have been new rules that have been lifted at the border. Those rules were that you had to be about 6 kilometers from the border. You could not just drive up and drop people off right at the border. Well, that's been relaxed. So now you are seeing even more people, believe it or not, since the first few days when we got here. But what you're seeing here is extraordinary, truly. I mean, people have come from all over the place. There are organizations, but they are just regular Polish citizens. There are citizens from other countries here as well in Europe who are just here because they saw the need for help. Now, if I can have Jerry just turn to my right, another bus has just, I think, picked people up there. And so you'll see, children sleeping on the bus. And these buses are taking people further into Poland, but they're also taking people sometimes into places like Germany. We've noticed a lot of Germans here offering their homes for people to sleep in and offering a ride as well. And to my right, you are seeing a particular place for mothers and children. They have diapers inside. They have SIM cards that are specifically for the women and children who have come here over the border. And can I just mention one more thing? I'm just going to be quiet for just a second. There are a lot of kids here. I have heard only one child cry this whole time. There are children who are infants. There are children who are 2 and 3 and 4 and all the way up to teenage years. And it is so interesting to me and almost unbelievable that in this terrible cold, away from their homes, in uncertainty with their parents.
Yeah, we just lost Sarah's IFB, or Sarah's sound, so I'm sorry. That's why I was knocking on my IFB. Thought it was my problem. So Wolf, Sarah was saying about the you don't hear kids crying and stuff a lot, which some trauma experts will point out that can be a sign of kids who have been through traumatic experiences and difficult experiences. You actually see a reduction sometimes in that kind of a response, which is obviously a worrying thing. But I mean, these kids have been through, just to get to that border, that point on the Polish side where Sarah is, it has been, for many of them, it has taken days and days of extremely difficult travel, Wolf.
You're absolutely right. Crying for little kids, that's normal. If they're not crying, you're absolutely right. That's a potential problem involving trauma in this particular case. Anderson, stand by. Right now, I want to bring in the UNICEF spokesman, James Elder. James, thank you so much for joining us. You're in Lviv, in Ukraine. You're helping these kids. Ukraine is pausing evacuations, as you know, James, along some humanitarian corridors due to this awful Russian shelling that's going on, targeting civilian areas. Is time running out for Ukrainian children to escape?
Yes, absolutely. And it's already run out for those children who've been killed in these bombardments. You know, getting that humanitarian access in is fundamentally critical, but opening up those corridors so those people can leave, the people you've seen, your viewers have seen, mothers and children fundamentally have to leave. I mean, they do everything they can in a bunker, as you know, mums, to keep a child safe, but I'm talking to mums who spent nights lying on top of the children, not just to keep them warm, because they think that's an extra layer of protection. In this madness, they have to be given safe passage out of there. But of course, for all those others who can't leave, the conflict has to stop. The missiles have to stop, Wolf.
They do, but it doesn't look like they're about to stop anytime soon. I want to get your reaction, James, to this truly heartbreaking account from one Ukrainian mother fleeing the country with her sick child on a train, evacuating other extremely sick children as well, as she carried her child for 3 days just to get on the train, and then found out her hometown was bombed, and now she can't get in touch with any of her family back home. Listen and watch this.
Папа ребенка, моя мама, сестра, все, папа мой. Никто не берет трубки, утки идут. И все. А больше говорит, что каждый понимает, что это значит.
What goes through your mind, James, when you see stories like that?
I shiver, Wolf. It hurts. It breaks. Maybe we're all running on empty here, and then just kick into gear. Find solutions. I mean, talk to those experts in my organization, UNICEF, and elsewhere. One thing for that woman's kind of story, on the route as people leave, we have a thing called Blue Dot Safe Spaces. It's all about tracking and tracing children. Yeah, track them, trace them, reunify them. So these spaces are where people can get critical information. We'll link with social workers, municipal governments. So it's one thing that we do for people like that, whose story is, as you know, repeated across the country.
UNICEF spokesman James Elder, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for all that UNICEF is doing. And to our viewers, for more information about how you can help humanitarian efforts in Ukraine, go to cnn.com/impact and help impact your world. It is so, so important. The breaking news continues next with new details of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's desperate plea to U.S. lawmakers for a no-fly zone to help save his country from Russia's brutal invasion. We're going to speak to one of the congressmen who was in that remote meeting. That's next.